Hello, good people of YouTube. Mountbatten here. And today we have some updates regarding Lesta, for those of you that are wondering what's going on with the studio. So some quick background on what's going on and what's been happening over the past couple of years. You can check out the timeline down below if you don't care about the background lore. If you already know, you can go ahead and just check out the news. But if you are unaware with what's going on with Lesta Games, I suggest you stick around for the full story. So, Lesta Games back in the day was an independent game studio in St. Petersburg, in Russia. Wargaming bought them up some years ago and tasked them with developing and running World of Warships, the game that we all know and love. And when Wargaming bought Lesta, they were renamed to Wargaming St. Petersburg. They operated under that name for years. So fast forward to more modern times, and well, history happened. Russia invaded Ukraine. Wargaming then decided a few months into that conflict to pull out of Russia and Belarus, which was a massive move by Wargaming because the company was founded in Minsk in Belarus. And the Minsk studio was the largest studio that ran World of Tanks, which is Wargaming's primary cash cow. And of course, St. Petersburg ran World of Warships, which is their other major title that has managed to stick around for, as we all know, 10 years coming up this September. So that was a pretty big move by Wargaming. Now, they didn't just shut down their servers for World of Tanks and World of Warships and World of Warplanes in Belarus and Russia. They instead handed them over to Lesta Games, who they just let go. They just gave the company back to, well, itself, and Lesta's now in charge of running their own version of World of Warships, World of Warplanes, and World of Tanks in the Belarus and Russian side of things. So as far as Wargaming is concerned, as far as Lesta's concerned, Wargaming's games are Wargaming's games, Lesta's games are Lesta's games. And if you've played the Lesta version of the game, which is called Mir Korabley, which is been told very close to just World of Warships, but in Russian. It is very close to the game that we know, but there are some major differences here and there, and so forth and so on. So, Lesta runs World of Warships, World of Tanks, and World of Warplanes on their side of the aisle for some time. And, it turns out when you are, one studio that's been given, Wargaming's moneymakers, World of Tanks and World of Warships for your side of the aisle, you tend to make some money. And that caught the attention of the Russian government, who then decided that Lesta was actually terrorist. Because a few months after the split, I think it was actually 6 or 7 months after the split, Wargaming went ahead and had a charity event on all their titles where you could buy, camos and patches and such that would raise money for ambulances to be used for, treating Ukrainian civilians. Well, the Russian government saw that as extremist terrorist activities, and they did not differentiate between Wargaming and Lesta, so they charged Lesta with being a bunch of terrorists. So then they moved to seize the studio's assets early, I believe was it April, May-ish of this year, and they went through court. The court was closed, so no reporters were allowed inside. Lesta was speaking out about, how this was wrong and how they've been, nothing but supportive of the Russian government. And, when I was checking out the game, they had like a super pro Russian event going on. I think it was like Russia's version of Fleet Week or whatever going on. And it was just like, oh, these are the guys they're saying aren't very patriotic and they're being terrorists, but yeah, whatever. So anyway, the trial concludes and Lesta loses their lawsuit, and now the Russian government fully went on to seize the rest of Lesta's assets and such. And that was the last that we heard about, at least on this channel. So there's been a couple of updates since then. There were some questions about, okay, what are they going to do? Are they just going to, liquidate the assets and, cash in, selling the servers, the equipment, the whatever, and, just take a quick check? But that does not appear to be the case. So a couple things happened recently in July. So in July, Lesta was put under management by a new company, which in a couple of different translations, I've seen this company be called a couple of different things. But JSC IT Technologies, which was established on July 1st of this year, and this was announced on July 11th. So, like, literally within 2 weeks of this company being formed, they are now being tasked with managing Lesta Games. And then things get pretty interesting from this point forward. So, apparently the guy that is being looked at for the new leadership position at Lesta Games is a man by the name of Boris Dobrodeyev, however you say his name. And he previously was the CEO of one VK Holding. VK Holding is, it's been explained to me as it started out as Russia's Facebook, and then it evolved into a media holding company. And we've mentioned them before when talking about Lesta Games and their whole situation. A lot of you guys that are more in the know suggested that eventually the game is going to wind up, or I'm sorry, the studio is going to be wound up in the ownership of VK Holdings, which is owned by one of the oligarchs over there in Russia. And it looks like that is very much is what's happening here, because Dobrodeyev, he was the former CEO of VK, and he got fired so that the son of Putin's chief of staff could take over the position as CEO of VK Holdings, which I'd imagine is a quite profitable and quite cushy job. So it seems like his reward for not making a stink about it and, leaving his job and letting, Putin do what Putin wants to do, he might be put in the CEO spot of Lesta Games, and therefore, that's another cushy job because Lesta Games is quite profitable. Of course, again, when you get handed water tanks, water warplanes, and water warships and such, you're basically being given a money printer, right? So, if this guy takes over, which it looks like that is what's happening, it's pretty clear that the company is eventually going to be acquired by VK Holding, through VK Holding probably acquiring this JSC IT Technologies, and thus, as the prophecies have foretold, it would become another piece in the VK Holding machine and directly under control of one of the oligarchs over there in Russia. So it does seem that the game is going to continue on, as that was the route that made most sense in my mind. Why would you just liquidate this cash cow and get a nice little check one time, or you can keep the game going and milk it for everything that it's worth. So there you go. So this probably also is the final nail in the coffin for the possibility of the two games, becoming one again. I know that's what a lot of you guys and myself were hoping, because there is a lot of good stuff on Lesta's client. I like the updated HUD. Again, I don't know what they've done with the visuals of the game. I'm not sure if they've cranked like the contrast up or something, but the game just seems a little bit crisper and clearer on Lesta's side of things. I think it has a lot to do with the HUD. If you look at the HUD in the background, and I've talked about this beforehand, but I still just can't get over it. Lesta went in and they touched up the HUD. They updated a lot of the symbols and such, to like, it appears to be more 4K textures rather than like 1080p textures and such. I play on 4K, so I can tell the difference. And when you go in and you refine those things, you touch them up, makes the game as a whole look a lot better. They've updated their sound over in the Lesta client as well. It sounds more along the lines like World of Tanks. Got that same kind of poppiness to it, if you guys know what I mean. So, there's good things like that on the Lesta client, and, some of the new ships that they've added in are pretty interesting. But, of course, it's not all good. They've added in God knows how many super ships, which I'm not a fan of that. Super submarines. And now super ships have an additional mod slot on top of everything else that they have going for them, which is a little bit ridiculous. They have the pay-to-win signal flags and such, so there are, again, a lot of good things on Lesta's client, and there's a lot of things that I don't like. So like many of you, I was hoping, eventually after the whole conflict has been settled and has died down, maybe the two companies could, come back together, and we kind of get, the best for the best of both worlds in the end, but I don't think that's going to really work anymore, as I don't think the Russian government's going to be too fond of giving up the company when, that time does come. The silver lining to this is that, you know, the employees there, the average Joes working there, they will still have their jobs and be able to provide for their families. So that's something that, you know, I'm glad to hear that that is happening. And I know there's going to be some people like, I should have left. I remember, look, not everyone can afford to just up and leave where they live. You know, they have families and such. Think about it right now. Can you just afford to drop what you're doing, quit your job, and move to the other side of the planet? Probably not. And you probably live in a country that's a lot wealthier than Russia, right? So, yeah. It's a good thing for the average Joe. You know, those are the people that really suffer in these conflicts when things go sideways. So I'm glad that the employees over there, the ones that couldn't afford to leave, couldn't afford to give up their jobs, will still have their jobs at the end of the day and be able to provide for their families. So guys, that's probably going to be it for a while with regards to Lesta. Let me know if you guys want to hear, you know, continuing updates about Lesta going forward in the comments down below. Hope you guys enjoyed. Have a wonderful Sunday, and well for the rest of your week. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.